have an article from the Chicago Tribune. President Obama may have joked with reporters when they asked how his throat was feeling after he was diagnosed with acid reflux. But acid reflux can be a serious health threat. Up to 20% of Americans suffer from typical symptoms of gastroesophageal reflux 2 times per week, says Gilbert Simoni, a gastroenterologist in Thousand Oaks. For most of these people, the fiery sensation of heartburn is a painful nuisance. For an unlucky few, however persistent, acid reflux can lead to a deadly cancer of the esophagus. Could each of you tell me what the research says?
My new friend.
Well, most people have heartburn or acid reflux at one time or another in their life, often from some overindulgence in something. But there are a group of people where the valve at the bottom of the esophagus, which is supposed to be more or less one-way valve, doesn't work. And they really do regurgitate stomach acid and digestive enzymes and bile. And we used to, when I was practicing regularly, we were screening people who had heartburn frequently enough that they took a medication twice a week or more. We were screening them for Barrett's esophagus, named after Dr. Barrett, who discovered this change in the lining. People actually grew a lining from their stomach. The stomach lining actually grew up into the esophagus to the level of the reflux. So you sort of had this backsplash area, and it would take on a new lining that was used to acid, like the stomach lining. And a new lining in a place that does not belong is very unstable, and there's the risk then of developing carcinoma of the esophagus in this displaced gastric lining. So we would check people regularly for this. And I remember the treatment of putting people's head legs up on blocks, so that they would be at a slant, and the acid would tend to stay down in the stomach when they lie down. And then we got these powerful proton pump inhibitors that would actually block acid production for 24 hours at a time. And that made a huge difference in the amount of complaints that we heard and in the amount of ulcers that we found in the esophagus. But blocking one's acid is not a good idea. And so maybe some other people would like to talk about that. Oh, yeah. Helicobacter pylori infection is an overgrowth of bacteria in the stomach lining that actually can cause ulcers. It's actually one of the main causes of ulcers. When I was in gastroenterology training in New Haven in the 70s, I was a control patient in a study looking at duodenitis and whether x-rays could show this inflamed duodenum or whether it could only show ulcers and so on. And then later in practice, I developed an ulcer. And the biopsy showed a huge infection with Helicobacter pylori infection. Yeah. And so we looked back at the biopsies from the control patients 10 years earlier in my training period, and it was loaded with Helicobacter pylori, but no one knew of its significance at the time. And so when I started in practice, I scoffed at the old practitioners that were treating ulcers with milk and cream every few hours, because I knew how to use Tagamet and Prilosec and all these wonder drugs. And I didn't understand why they looked at me sort of tongue-in-cheek, that I was so enthusiastic about my new therapies. And then when we realized that H. pylori was causing the ulcers, then I understood.
We didn't discover that until the 90s.
Yes, yes. And so when new things come out, the one who most recently graduated is the most excited about it. And the old guys have seen, and gals have seen things come and then not be so good, or something else is involved. So we have to give time to some of these things until we know what's happening. But the relationship between H. pylori and reflux esophagitis is hard to understand. H. pylori in some settings, protects people from reflux esophagitis. And you kill off the H. pylori so you don't get the ulcers, and then the reflux is worse. And the thing that I want someone else on the panel to explain is why some of the symptoms that I treated for years as if it was the enemy, if acid was the enemy, now we're finding out that some of those symptoms are caused by not enough acid. And so we'll see what the panel does with that.
I'm going to pass this on to the others, but I did want to say one thing that's just kind of interesting. I read a study once that looked at broccoli sprouts as something that could kill off H. pylori, or prevent. No, it was actually killing off the Helicobacter, and they found that the broccoli sprouts were more effective than some of the most potent drugs that they pitted it against in this study. Very, very interesting. Broccoli sprouts produce probably 50 to 100 times more sulforaphane than mature broccoli. And this has some pretty profound effects on bad bacteria. But anyway, I'll pass it on.
Well, I just want to concur with the idea that cruciferous vegetables inhibit the growth of H. pylori and increase the resistance of the stomach to acid and help restore the viability and health of the cells that line the digestive tract. In other words, let me say that one more time, that there's a compound called ITC, or isothiocyanates, and there's about 100 different isothiocyanates that are produced when you eat different types of green vegetables. Now, the enzyme that makes the isothiocyanates is called myrosinase. And myrosinase is heat sensitive. So when you cook your broccoli or your Brussels sprouts, and then you chew it, you're not going to form any of those protective compounds, because the green vegetable plant cell has a compound called glucosinolate inside the vegetable. And the myrosinase enzyme changes the glucosinolate into the isothiocyanate. And that occurs in the mouth as you're chewing the vegetable. And the isothiocyanate is not heat sensitive, but the myrosinase enzyme is. So when you cook the cruciferous vegetable, you don't get as many ITCs formed. So it's the regular consumption, the almost everyday consumption of raw greens, raw cruciferous vegetables, broccoli sprouts, kale, collards, bok choy, arugula, watercress, raw in your diet, chewed well in the mouth, and it's with a salad.
Say that twice.
Yeah, that the better you chew them, the more ITCs that are formed. Now, you could get some ITC formation from your cooked Brussels sprouts and cooked broccoli, because the myrosinase enzyme that you got from eating the raw vegetables could be utilized by the body to create some more ITCs from the cooked vegetables that you ate, but you still have to eat some of those raw vegetables to get the myrosinase enzyme to activate the cooked vegetables. The point I'm making is that intellectually, and put some shredded red cabbage on your salad. Put some green cabbage or savoy cabbage, put some kale, put some bok choy, put some arugula, put watercress. Intentionally put these green vegetables and chew them up very well as part of your salad. Don't just eat straight lettuce. And then obviously the better you chew your salad, the more you produce. So I'm suggesting that the overgrowth of H. pylori is a nutritional problem, an immune system suppression. It shouldn't happen in people that have really strong immune systems eating a healthy diet. And also the protective production of the mucosal lining, the ability of the cells to repair themselves, because we have a lot of sloughing of cells and destruction of the digestive lining with normal digestion. Those cells have to replicate and repair themselves all the time. And that cell repair, replenishment of the cells, and replenishment of mucus all has to do with the quality of your diet too. And of course, I know you're going to bring up stress and other issues and sleep and other things that play a role, but the point is that we have control over this condition. And that, if you eat the American diet with all the high protein foods that demand so much extra acid, and the processed foods and the things that close off the elimination of food, in other words, we keep food in our digestive tract and our stomach so long the acid floats around there forever, then you're going to have, hemorrhoids, diverticulum, reflux, and you have to live close to a good hospital and make sure you're friendly with all the physicians there and take a lot of drugs.
That's an oxymoron, close to a good hospital. This is certainly a modern disease, like Dr. Fuhrman just said. It was considered when I was a boy a blue-collar concern. My grandfather, who was a painter, he used to paint bridges going from New York to New Jersey and one part of New York to the other. When I smell Rolaids, which is an antacid, I become sentimental. He was my good buddy. And you didn't see the middle and upper middle class with these problems. But ironically, everyone got into the trap. And the trap is eating foods that we ought not to consume. And of course, animal-based foods are there. Processed, chemicalized, pesticide, fungicide, riddled foods. Genetically modified foods are the number one. I'm sure you listened closely on the panel last night where Jeffrey actually probably quoted a Monsanto study that before they put Roundup on the market, they actually proved in their own study that it perforated the intestines of the animals. And this Senef, out of MIT, has just reconfirmed with autism. Remember I spoke about autism the other day, and she's showing that the gastrointestinal problem, and there's a pathway that shuts down, and it's because of what that Roundup does. It's spliced into high fructose corn syrup. The other thing I'd like to say about this is that I see it correctable in the vast majority of cases. Everything we've said, we don't have to repeat. Eating a good diet, I would say more so raw. There's very little benefit when you cook a cruciferous vegetable. I got that from the horse's mouth, the number one epicenter of phytochemical research, Oregon State University, where Linus Pauling's alma mater was. And after his death, they moved it from Palo Alto up there. I had the privilege to spend a half a day with the researchers, and I asked them something interesting, because I'm acutely interested in phytochemicals, because it gave us the answer of why the Hippocrates program has been so incredibly helpful in people's conquest of disorders and fighting disease and staying young. And I said, when you're studying, do you notice a difference between when you're looking at a raw material and it's cooked? They said it's inert when it's cooked. I said, do you report that? And they said, absolutely not. I said, why wouldn't you report that? They said, it's not warranted in the research. They're not asking us to report if something's active or not. They want us to identify and name a phytochemical in the food. Isn't that interesting? So that's how science works. They're on one page and they don't see its blinders on them. But everything that was said here by everyone was completely correct with the sulforaphane that you get in the cabbage family. Onion sprouts are higher than anything in it. Garlic sprouts. You can just take garlic, raw garlic, organic of course, because most of it's irradiated if it's not raw. Put that into a little container in your kitchen window and grow it and eat the greens. Delicious, by the way, too. The other thing is fenugreek sprout juice has been incredibly effective. Raw aloe has been effective. We actually suggest anal implantation of some of this when you have problems. H. pylori can be helped. I don't think it can be corrected when it's large enough just by broccoli sprouts alone. It may be more preventative. But what I've seen is in all the years we've used massive amounts of broccoli sprouts, usually it returns. So either you go the mainstream way where a doctor gives you a short-term antibiotic, which works in 99% of the cases, or a more natural way, you'd go to an herbal with a doctor who knows what she or he's doing with this. But this is a big issue because esophageal cancer is a nasty cancer. And a high percentage of people that have consistent auto-reflux end up with that cancer. Or by the way, they don't talk about other forms of cancer, stomach cancer, colon cancer, much higher levels of it. And I wouldn't doubt if other forms of cancer that maybe we're not aware of today are part and parcel to it.
Excuse me, Steve, one other comment. We have lots of people over the course of time when they're working on their health that want to get off of an acid suppression medication, such as the purple pill. That's a bit hard to do because it suppresses acid to such a degree that when you stop it, there's a surge of acid, convincing you in a very experiential way that you must go back on it and stay on it. And the pharmaceutical company's literature does not tell people what the helpful way is to get off the product. That might be very helpful in who might want to try it. But to get people off of a acid blocking agent that works for 24 to 36 hours, we tell people that there's going to be an acid surge, you need to expect that, and we give you a substitute like a Pepsid or a Zantac that has an acid suppressing time period of 6 to 12 hours, and to use those only when absolutely necessary while they're coming off. Now this lady whose story you heard earlier today when Dr. Deal was talking, who had 16 diseases, one of which was heartburn and acid indigestion and irritable bowel and all kinds of things, she felt better right away in 2 weeks on the therapeutic lifestyle change program. But it was a little bit hard for her to give up the acid suppression medication. And so it needed to be tapered and going to, kind of like coming off cigarettes and going to a lower nicotine cigarette. Still the same number of cigarettes, but less and less, tapering off the addictive component. So that's something to keep in mind, that you have to work your way off of an H2 blocker.
One addendum to this is the purple pill, people don't have the advantage to see a physician anymore. That's gone over the counter now. So unless you're a diligent research scientist who's taking the purple pill, you probably won't get the advice, and this is really smart and good advice. So you're taking it and you're going to have surges, and it's a perpetuation of it.